Hey everyone, you're listening to another episode of Read, Watch, Listen on the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network. My name is Chris Barnes. We have a special guest today. Our special guest is Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman. She represents East Brunswick as part of District 12. Congresswoman, thank you for being on our show today.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Glad to be here.
It's always great seeing you, and thank you for being on our podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Your library is very important. I think that we tried very hard to bring some resources there so that you can do some upgrading.
Well, it's greatly appreciated on behalf of all of us. So the podcast is Read, Watch, Listen, and we talk to people in the community about what they've been enjoying, reading, watching, and listening. So we're going to start it with Congresswoman. What have you been reading recently?
A lot of briefings, 7 days a week briefings, and a lot of articles, not many books. One of the two books that I read that I really enjoyed, one was Representative Clyburn's book, Blessed Experiences, and the other one was on a topic that's very important to me, poverty in America, which was written by Matt Desmond, because that's one of my anchor points dealing with the issue of poverty in America and what we should do about it. Other than that, I'm a daily Bible reader. I have a book of meditations and scriptures that I not only read every day, but I share them every day as well. And a lot of people look forward to them. I share them on Facebook. I share them on text messages and things of that nature. But to be perfectly honest with you, there are so many issues that are confronting us in Congress right now. I'm just trying to stay up to date on every one of them. I try to read the New York Times, Washington Post, and the local papers and everything I can to just make sure that I'm paying attention to different perspectives on these very important issues to our democracy.
No, very important. And I can imagine, as being a Congresswoman, you are all over the place, all over the time, and it's a lot to consume. Are you a print reader or as an online screen reader?
Mostly online. It's just simpler. Not only do I have the news feed that comes into me because I just am connected to different news feeds, but also my staff gives me an updated list of articles in the paper, either around issues that are important to us or issues that mention us.
Very important. And the links to the books that you mentioned, we're going to tell our listeners right now that in the show notes, there's going to be a list of where you can find them at East Brunswick Public Library. So all of your recommendations will be able to be found here at the library or through our library consortium. So that finishes up the reading part of our interview. So next, we're going to be talking about what have you been watching, like television shows, movies, documentaries.
I watched Rustin most recently, which was a really important movie on the 1963 March on Washington. I've been watching some documentaries on some of the Black civil rights leaders, Dr. King, things of that nature. My husband complains because I do escape watching on TV. So I watch things like The Gilded Age. I watch Blue Bloods because I love the family dynamic in Blue Bloods more than any other part of the story because it reminds me of my family. My family's always been, we were taught to always be family first. And I am a Hallmark Channel junkie because they always end happily ever after. And since I'm mired in so much stuff here down in Washington, it doesn't end happily ever after. That's been my escape.
I completely agree with you. I was reading somewhere that they said that because of the pandemic and things gone on in the last couple of years, everyone that's been watching Hallmark Channel, that their television ratings have gone through the roof. And you're right. It's a pleasant watch. There's just enough intrigue and suspense on it that you're not going to get upset. And everything is neatly tied up in an hour or two.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's become so diverse now. So that you see all kinds of relationships, you see all kinds of ethnicities and races represented and situations. So yeah, that's my fun thing to watch.
I was guilty as charged too. And I like how they even managed to weave in some humor into it too, with whatever the relationship problem is or how this star-crossed couple is somehow going to have to save their hometown. But there's always some subplot in there that I just can't stop laughing at. And I don't know how they can think of so many so quickly.
Well, there's always some similarity. My husband will say, well, didn't we just watch it? I said, well, no, that wasn't the one we were watching, but similar storylines.
No doubt. And our final part of our Read, Watch, Listen to is what have you been listening to? It's going to be music, podcasts.
My husband and I drive from D.C. to New Jersey and New Jersey back to D.C. And the entire time, I'm either listening to MSNBC, but most likely I'm listening to gospel music. I love gospel music. It sort of settles me. My faith is so vitally important to me. And so I listen in the car. I don't listen at home on the radio or anything like that. I will listen to a podcast if someone recommends it to me. I'm just not a follower of podcasts, but I have a lot of time in the car. I've got a good 6-7 hours a week in the car going 3.5 up, 3.5 back, that kind of thing. And I mostly listen to gospel music because that's what makes me hopeful and reminds me of why I do and believe what I do and believe.
Now, is there a gospel vocalist that you prefer? Who's your go-to?
Well, I love all of Richard Smallwood's music. I love Tramaine Hawkins. My favorite gospel song is called Changed. It's a Walter Hawkins song. I love a variety of artists. I like a very melodic music. So I like it when there are Hezekiah Walker, when there's a big choir behind them, and I sing along with them. I think people are wondering as they're passing us on the road, well, what's going on in that car? Because I'm a very animated listener of gospel music.
I've always believed that if you're in a car for longer than 40 minutes and you're not singing along, then there's something wrong. And with a 3.5 hour commute each way, you have to sing it.
Yeah. So if our listeners are interested in gospel music, check out Richard Smallwood, check out Tramaine Hawkins, and check out Byron Cage. They've got some extraordinary messages and beautiful sounding music. Good for the soul.
No doubt. And those will be links in our show notes so our listeners can find these and they can get into it too. Congresswoman, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I'm just so happy to have this conversation with you as a representative of the libraries. We know how important access to books and to have the freedom to read what you want to read, to learn what you need to learn. I'm so happy to be in New Jersey where we have that freedom. That freedom is not experienced all over the country. But we in Congress need to protect the right to have access to whatever books that our parents think are appropriate for us as minors and that we as adults want to read. Our history is rich because our country is so diverse. Our diversity is our strength. It is our beauty. And it is what makes us so unique in this world.
I couldn't say it any better. Congresswoman, thank you again for your time today, for being on Read, Watch, Listen. You can reach the Congresswoman via her website at watsoncoleman.house.gov and on social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and X. Her social media handle is @RepBonnie. And if you need any assistance with a federal agency, you can reach out directly to the Congresswoman's office at 609-883-0026. Thank you again, Congresswoman, for being our special guest today. Special thanks, as always, to our producer, Melissa Hozick. You can check this out in dozens of other East Brunswick Public Library podcasts at ebpl.org/podcast. I'm Chris Barnes. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Chris.